Isn't that? I mean, I realize I shouldn't be impressed by the fact that light makes things lighter, but just, I mean, isn't that? See, before,
Yeah,
after, it really is
that was so much
illuminating.
better.
Yeah,
Illuminating.
yeah.
This is eerie. I just came out of a lecture of Ali Abdaal's part-time YouTuber class, and this exact thing I just saw happen about 3 times of demonstrating the benefit of good lighting in making YouTube videos. And they would show before and after where the only thing changed was better lighting. And it's
Hmm.
incredibly dark to incredibly light. Something that that I've had reinforced going through this class is the order of operations of what is important to improve when making YouTube videos. It's audio first, and then lighting, and then video. And I would not have put audio first if I was trying to come up with this tabula rasa, but it makes sense. The rationale is that people can tolerate poor video quality, but it's difficult to tolerate bad audio quality. So the best investment to make it at first is a better
Yeah,
microphone.
and the other thing is, presumably, if you think about where you get most of the communication from, it's from the audio more than the video, right? In a video where someone is talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it might make sense.
Yeah, the video is sort of like you can listen to a podcast, but you can't just watch a video with no audio. The video is just kind of there for the
It depends on the video.
nonverbal
There are some
communication.
videos that are visual. Some videos have no audio because they are purely visual, or the
Yeah.
audio is just is secondary, is background music.
Sure.
But it's not critical to conveying the message. But in a video of someone speaking where the core that's being conveyed is being conveyed through the words, the audio is more important.
That makes sense. What's an example of a video that you would just do video only, like a dance or like a
Sure.
slideshow or like a
Yes.
That seems much lower fidelity, but I guess by the same rationale, that's kind of what a book is, and you can get just as much information from a book as you can from a podcast. Huh. I'm excited for Neuralink of a way that we could just tap into abstract thought without having to rely on one of our senses to see the world. That conveying a thought from my brain to yours, we could go at much higher fidelity than trying to encode it and then transmit it and then decode it through one of these visual or auditory mediums. The ideal of being able to just transfer a thought directly is very exciting.
What does that even look like, though? Like, are we... Does that even make sense as a concept?
I think it does.
When you transmit when you encode and send me your thought and I decode it and I understand it, it's not only the language that I'm processing, but I'm also then understanding what you're saying in the context of everything I have experienced in the past, right?
Yes.
If you just took that thought directly from your head to mine, it might make no sense. That is to say, in the same manner as, I guess what I'm getting at is the source code in the same language to begin with, before you compile it, decompile it, and whatever else. Is the core of the thought when it's in your head in the same space as or the same the same language, if you like, as in mine. And I realize that's a strange concept because we're talking about before language comes into it, but or another way of saying that is, if you take, I guess the analogy would be that your brain is running the kind of has the machine code. And speech is you're taking it to higher level abstractions, sending it to someone else and they're decoding it. You're assuming that my decode is a perfect reversal of your encode. But it may not be. I may be decoding to a totally different operating system.
This is a problem I've thought about, and I agree. If I took the concept of Apple in my head and said, okay, these are the neurons that light up in Christian's head when he thinks about the concept of apple-ness.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to map, these are the analogous neurons in Shai's head. And I lit up those neurons. I think it's unlikely that lighting up those neurons in your head would
Right,
evoke
that's
the
exactly
concept
it.
of
Right. So
appleness.
are you transmitting to me the concept of apple, or would you be transmitting to me neuron 373? And in
Right.
my head, neuron 373 is the kangaroo,
Right.
and we've just completely, and actually the encode decode process is essential for
Yes.
you to convey that you meant the apple.
I think the answer to this is you would need to learn a new base language that was the common set of neuron firing patterns of different concepts. And I think what that would look like is you have Duolingo on your phone, and Duolingo shows you a picture of an apple and has the word apple, and then fires those neurons in your head and is like, okay, this is our common understanding of what appleness means.
Right, but you know
And
what
actually,
you've just done?
you've made a bunch of robots.
No, you've just invented a language.
Uh,
You've just said, what
yes.
if we just give everyone? You've basically just said, what if we give everyone the same base language of English?
Yes.
Because don't forget, when you have that Duolingo Apple to head concept,
Yeah.
again, if I interpret that apple slightly differently than you do, we now have different perceptions,
Yes.
or I may interpret it based on past experiences that were different to yours. So you've just moved the exact same process of language learning to a different level of in the process.
It would be learning a different language, yes. And I don't see another way around that.
I'm not sure there is one. But
the advantage of doing it that way then is we can communicate with much higher fidelity. The sales pitch would be, hey, if you would like to communicate 10 to 100 times faster than you can currently by talking and reading and writing, here's the Duolingo app for learning the base set of language, and then you can jack into the new next level internet and talk with people much faster. Although in saying this and thinking it out loud, I'm curious if there's not some advantage to you and I having different neuron firing patterns of apple, because you're maybe when you look at an apple, you're seeing the roundness and the color of it, and when I see apple, I'm thinking about the taste, and it's useful and beneficial for us to have different ways of mapping the concept of apple to a different neuron firing pattern.
And that's exactly it, because if everybody only had exactly the same base knowledges and understandings as you, then there would be no value to collaboration.
Yes.
So it's all well and good that you could tell me that you were thinking about apples right now, but if you were trying to bounce ideas off me, I would just be giving back the exact same ones you already had. Right. Because I wouldn't be able to communicate one that you didn't already have in your base brain of concepts.
Which I suppose is also a disadvantage of language. The trade-off with language is we're making it more specific, and we're having a common way of communicating about something. And the sacrifice is we're making more generalizations about the world. We have a concept of apple, and now we don't really think about individual apples anymore. We're thinking about the concept of appleness. And I suppose that's
100%.
I'm not.
Yes, what you're saying is absolutely right. Did you watch the TED Talk I sent you, not yesterday, but a few weeks ago, about language shaping how you think?
I'm having trouble recalling. I loved the one you sent yesterday. I want to talk about that one. Remind me what the language shaping the way you think. What was that one?
It was about essentially this. It was the idea that it's probably best by way of example. So it was exploring ideas such as, in Russian, there is a different word for a light blue than there is for a dark blue. They don't describe them as light and dark of the same thing. They are totally distinct colors in Russian, in the Russian language. And as a result, if you take a Russian person and show them a screen where the color changes from time to time, when the color just changes shade, your brain doesn't really notice it. As soon as it changes to a different color, your brain spikes. It's seen something has changed. Mm-hmm. Now for us, our brain does not do that spike when you go from light blue to dark blue, but for a Russian it does. The fact that they've learned a language that has two different words for those has actually affected the way that they perceive the colors. They can see the difference between light and dark blue as totally different colors. They can notice when it changes better than we can, and it fires their brain differently. Other examples were languages where, in English, if you have a scene where somebody knocks something over, Accidentally, they're in a museum, they turn around, they smash the vase on the floor. In English, we say he broke the vase. He knocked the vase over. There are other languages where they would say the vase fell. The concept of the person doing it does not feature. So much so that that the phrase "I broke my arm" would sound ludicrous, because that would mean that I intentionally set out to break my arm. Right? We say I broke my arm to mean it accidentally happened. We say he broke the vase. In those languages, they don't say he broke the vase. They say the vase fell. And as a result, people who speak those languages are less likely to hold the person to be at fault.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just because of the language they learned. You then take like a police situation, you ask them to do a crime report, they are less likely to remember who it was that broke the vase, because it didn't play into their linguistic processing of the situation. Other examples were that there are languages where they don't have a word for each number. And people who speak those languages cannot remember how many of a certain item there were, because they don't have the words for it.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell you that there were a lot or a little, but actually if you showed them 9 ducks and you said, can you go and get 1 piece of bread for each duck? They are bad at that task because they don't have the word 9.
Yes.
Right? So that was what it was all about. Language, actually, the language that you learn actually impacting the way that you perceive the world, not just the way you communicate about it.
I'm very impressed by your recall. That was point for point. I remember now the video you were talking about.
Oh, you have watched it? Okay, well then that was a waste of time. Thanks so much.
I was reminded of the thoughts I was thinking while I was watching it. You went point for point in the video. That was great. I'm impressed. I'm also reminded of a conversation I had with my housemate in this Airbnb last night. I was doing a puzzle. A puzzle it's been here since before I moved in, just sitting on a coffee table, half finished.
A jigsaw puzzle or
a jigsaw puzzle, yes.
Okay, yep.
Of a bunch of cats playing with yarn, and I don't know who started it, but they started it. The completed part of the puzzle is the upper left-hand corner. There's no border. There's no rhyme or reason to. It's a perfect. Okay. I don't know what psychopath started this puzzle, so I decided last night I'm going to finish this puzzle because I have to. And once it's finished, then I can put it away, and that's what I need to do. So I was doing it last night, and there was a piece that was just the cardboard. It had no picture on the front. And my housemate, in commenting on this piece and sort of lamenting it's going to be more difficult to finish the puzzle now because this piece doesn't have the picture on it, you're going to have to go just by shape, said the phrase, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, someone peeled off the front of that puzzle piece as a way to point out there's something abnormal about this puzzle piece. And I was struck for the next few minutes, just sort of chewing on, you don't know that a person did this. You're assuming malicious intent in something that sort of just happens to be the state of the world. And it may very well be that someone went into this puzzle box and was like, oh, I'm gonna I'm gonna really show somebody in the future, I'm gonna meticulously peel off the front of this puzzle piece and then throw it away, but leave that piece with just the cardboard in there. But it has me thinking in this mindset of I see that framing so often. I'm reminded also of, in Stoicism, there's an aphorism of a man sleeping in a boat, and there's some kids playing by the shore, and they have their own boat, and he's taking a nap, and as he's drifting off to sleep, he perceives that the kids have slammed their own boat into his, and he's furious, and he was grumbling and waking up, and I'm really going to show these kids, for how dare they bump into my boat. And he gets up and sees it's actually a boat that had gotten untied from the other side of the lake, and the wind had blown the boat into his own boat. And all of a sudden, his anger is diffused. I can't possibly be angry at the wind, so there's no reason to be angry. But and the lesson of this in Stoicism is, what's the difference? In both cases, a thing happened, and if you are capable of choosing happiness, sort of tying this into the video that you sent yesterday, why would you not also choose happiness and choose not to be angry in the case where kids had intentionally gone and bumped into your boat? There's no reason. There's certainly no reason to assume malicious intent in bad things that just happen. And it may not even be advantageous to assume malicious intent in situations where that is actually what was happening, trying to optimize for happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about that stuff as well. The kind of the that yeah, everyone acts exactly how exactly based on their level of, he calls it consciousness, as in how aware they are of the world versus how much they're living out their conditioned mind and ego and so on, which he calls unconscious. But essentially, yeah, if someone does something that's not very nice to you, then that is what they were capable of doing at that time. And so it isn't particularly different than the weather causing a problem or anything else. All of it is just the universe acting out how the universe is. And that includes that some people are stuck in their conditioned thought patterns that make them do not very nice things, for example. But that is the way it is. No different than the wind.
I think I've come to frame humans as wind, and it's benefited my tranquility of even if someone is rude or angry or mean or spiteful. It took me forever to decompress this, but I grew up with an emotionally abusive mother and went through recently in just the last few years all these stages of wanting to blame her for every bad thing that ever happened in my life because she's the person who shaped me, and feeling angry that she was like this and wanting her to be a different way. And I've come to be very at peace with it. Had a very pleasant Thanksgiving with her this last week. Didn't have a conversation with her and didn't interact with her because I've framed her as that this is a person who I love and I care about a lot, but it's beyond my capacity to have a relationship that's good for either of us. And so keeping a boundary there is very important and the most rational thing to do. And it's, I've just sort of made peace with it of like, this is the way that she is. She did not choose to be this way. And there are ways that I've identified that she can act in a way that's harmful for me. And there are ways that I've identified of ways that I can protect myself so that I'm not harmed. And I certainly don't want to be causing more maliciousness by acting in a way that's trying to get back at her for ways that she slights me or that I perceive that she's slighted me. I feel like I feel like I've come to a very healthy place of defining that relationship, looking at her as if she is the wind. That this is just another, it's another aspect of this video game that I'm playing, and getting angry at adversaries in video games is sort of besides the point. You want adversaries in video games because otherwise it's a boring video game. It's a challenge to be overcome rather than a target to be angry at, to shift blame for things that go wrong in my life.
Because it's amazing how contagious that negativity is, right? Like someone is negative or acts in untoward ways with you. It's so easy for that to trigger the same thing in you, and then you trigger it back in them.
Yeah.
And other people that are around you. Like it's just there's so much when you and once you came to that place of I can step out of this a little bit, presumably those negative patterns didn't continue to happen around you. Like when you stop energizing it loses its energy. It can't. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If I'm not, and I think it's so. It used to be so easy for me to justify. Oh well, I'm not feeding into this pattern. I'm not strengthening it. I'm just defending myself, or I'm just doing what's necessary. And having come to this place of realizing, oh no, I can just take a step back, and I don't need to correct her when she says something blatantly wrong. I can just choose to not say anything. Yeah, it just immediately diffuses. That I think I had much more power's the wrong word. I had much more control over the situation than I realized. I I was feeding into the negative patterns much more than I realized.
Yeah, which, like
Toxicity
you say,
is a
is
game
so
that,
easy to do when it's, I'm not shouting, I'm not yelling, I'm just defending my position.
right.
But it turns out that that's like any kind of reactivity is that same thing. Is still
Yeah.
going is any form of reactivity is going to be negative. Whether it's attack or it's defense. Yeah, the end result is the same. It continues to energize the pattern.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've come to a much healthier space with that. I loved the video that you sent yesterday, "The Surprising Science of Happiness," the TED Talk by Dan Gilbert. Man, I have you read "Stumbling on Happiness"?
No.
That just got bumped way up on my list. It really clicked for me, this framing. I'd heard that case study before of that. I think it's a year after winning the lottery and a year after becoming paraplegic. Those people are the same level of happiness. And this video just it clarified and solidified my thoughts on that. What a crazy concept of. Well, the clarifying piece of it for me was the way that he framed your brain is a happiness machine. Your brain is capable of producing happiness in any situation, and it's the reason why it was important evolutionarily for the brain to triple in size was that it's very useful to be able to predict the future, to be able to simulate different realities, and that's sort of a double-edged sword of, certainly if I'm standing at a crossroads and I can either choose to go to the right in the universe where I win the lottery, or I can choose to go to the left where I become quadriplegic. In evolutionary terms, I want this prediction machine to choose win the lottery because that's a higher probability choice. I'm much more likely to pass on my genes if I make choices like winning the lottery over becoming quadriplegic. And after the choice is made, after you've been tied to the mast and you can't go back, evolutionarily, it's in your best interest to just be okay with whatever decision you made because you can't change it. That is now the highest probability choice of whatever happened. Manufacture happiness so that you're not depressed and lamenting the choice that you didn't make.
And yet we haven't got to that point.
Where we're
largely
not capable of manufacturing happiness. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying you're right. From an evolutionary perspective, it would be beneficial to just accept at that point what you can't change. And yet the vast majority of us as humans are not capable of doing that well.
Yes.
So we have not yet reached the subsequent stage of evolution, whereby, and whether it's an evolution thing, I don't know, but it is a I do think it's something that will continue that people will like. Yeah, I guess evolution is the right term. I think people will ultimately get better at it, and if we don't, I think we might just end up destroying the planet. I think that might be the options. Like the more non-acceptance there is, the more destruction there seems to be, and the more like it's just an entire planet of people acting out those negative patterns ultimately. And I think that has the potential. I think anything that you see on the micro level of people, you see the same at a more macro level. And I think it's I think as humans, the more damage we're doing, like the more negativity that is within us, like you just see that translate to negativity in the world amongst, like, between people and to the planet and to various other things.
The level of trying to fix these problems at the level of the individual seems like the best vector, the higher level patterns that we're seeing of non-tolerance, and I'm concerned about the U.S. It feels like we're approaching the brink of a civil war.
But you're absolutely right that the place to fix that is not at the level of the you can't fix that at the level of the systems and structures.
Right.
If you could flip a switch and fix it at the internal level of the humans, everything would sort itself out very quickly.
Yep. Which is promising, because that's a solvable problem. We're talking about it in terms of evolution, but it's becoming more emotionally healthy and learning the skills of being less reactive are not things that require genetic changes. That's a thought evolution. That's an evolution on the level of
that's exactly it. You're right. It would be very easy to fix if it weren't for the old patterns wanting to keep the old patterns going. If everybody became more emotionally healthy, if all of us became more emotionally healthy, it would fix all those problems. But the existing problems, or the existing patterns in the people, will not allow that to happen. Or will at least fight to not allow that to happen.
Yes. Anytime anything exists, its primary purpose becomes continuing to exist, including companies and thought patterns and everything else. That's
similar to what they were saying in the TED Talk yesterday, where he said there's a reason that people don't, that society doesn't believe that you can manufacture happiness, because it would destroy a lot of the, commercialism and various structures that have been created by humans.
Yes.
With their patterns in the first place.
All we would need is whale blubber, that the the only thing that the Inuits need. What a great case study of people say that all these problems are created because of lack of resources and scarcity, which of course resources are limited, but here's this group of people that's perfectly content and happy on whale blubber and nothing else. So you can't tell me that
and the entirety of the civilization that we have created has been created to keep us stuck in that civilization. Like, that is the negativity totally just feeds the negativity and makes the world go round, or thinks it does.
I'm optimistic about that, because the problem of breaking old patterns and replacing them with healthier ones feels very tractable. That's sort of the core problem of software and building businesses. Is you're doing something in the way that you're currently doing it, and you're experiencing a problem because of that. And here are the words that you're using to explain that problem. So for someone who's not emotionally healthy, I probably wouldn't say, hey, you're emotionally unintelligent. Here's how you did it. I would say something like, hey, don't you hate it when you're in a situation and you feel like the people you're talking to have all these invisible tripwires of you feel like they get offended over nothing. I have some tools to be able to teach you how you can understand other people better and get them to do what you want, because those are the terms that they would be using to describe the problem that they have. And then you can sort of sneak in like, okay, the way to do that is you stop being the asshole, because that's the problem. Here's stoicism and these other emotional toolkits.
Yes, and I mean, to an extent, I think if anything's going to work, then you're along the right lines there. And that was kind of, so I gave a talk last week at a university, and that was kind of my MO, if you like, was I want to talk about mental health, but if I were them, like when I was in their position, however many years ago, I would have been totally turned off by someone showing up with a talk like that.
Yep.
And so how do I get the points across? And that was where like I was putting together what my talk should be, and I was like, what would I have wanted? What do I wish I had known earlier? And what came out was a lot of stuff about mental health, about mindset. It was in the context of business. I was speaking at a business school. But I was kind of the biggest thing for me has not been any particular business strategy or anything like that, or whatever else that might traditionally be given in a talk like this. It was mindset stuff. But I would have been totally turned off by that. And so how do I get that across to people who might otherwise be skeptical. I think that's similar to what you're saying there. That how can you get people to care about things when they don't realize they should care about them? Yeah, they might, like you say, maybe they're problem aware, but that then becomes it's that kind of, you then get to that, or you don't want to get to that bait and switch of like, the problem is with these other people. Actually, the problem is with you. And if people aren't ready to hear that, if you're, again, everything wants to keep itself alive, right? So if you have those negative patterns going on, and someone suggests to you that the negative patterns might be the problem, you will react and say, no, it isn't, probably angrily or defensively. But yeah.
You need to approach it delicately, because if you approach those old patterns head on, it evokes a defense response. It evokes a response of you're trying to attack who I am. You're trying to attack my patterns. No, you're bad. I'm good. Go away. But this is,
people won't hear something unless they want to hear it.
Right.
If there's no space in your head for the answer, then the answer will bounce off your head.
Yes,
that's the. But I also think, to a large part, yes, there are things that you might be able to convey to people, but more than anything, it's not about. I think it comes back to what we said before about, you can't, in the situation of a parent who is acting out these patterns, you feel like you can diffuse the patterns by being defensive or defending your position, or the rest of it, and you can't. The only way to diffuse it is for you to not rise to it. And I think largely it's the same thing happening. Like, there's only so much you can do to say, I am going to fix the world and all its problems, or fix the people and all their problems, versus saying, I can act the best possible way in myself and just trust that will ripple. So rather than, because otherwise, if you try and show someone who doesn't want to hear it, where their problems are, you're just going to be it's just going to keep rising.
I agree that trying to fix someone's problems who's not yet aware of any problem is futile, and that the best way to help those people is to live your own best life, to be an example for them, and then hopefully they take inspiration from you and notice.
I don't mean it's a conscious thing, by the way. I don't mean in a conscious way that they would say, you are now inspiring me. I mean that on a deeper level, it will, as you've seen, if somebody is angry, it can make the people around them be angry back.
Yes.
They're not consciously aware of doing it.
Right.
But I think these things, and again, I don't know that you can get into there's the spiritual way of looking at that, which is people's vibrational frequencies and energies. But I think those words can be quite off-putting, and actually what it's really getting at is that pattern that we've all seen happen, where if someone is angry, if someone is negative, it is contagious. That's, I don't think you have to describe it on the level of their vibrational energy is negative and it vibrates other people to be negative.
Yes.
If people are negative, you see it happen to the people around them become negative. Like that's, and it might seem obvious that would happen, but when you stop and think about it, it's not obvious. Why should one person being negative make another person be negative?
Yeah, like if I have a rogue computer in a network that's spitting out trash network packets or something, I wouldn't necessarily expect that would have an influence on the other computers in that network. But then actually thinking through
really
that,
what's
no, it
happening,
would.
Go on.
If there's more trash in the network now, if there's more noise now, the other nodes in the network need to augment their own behavior to adapt to this new environment in the network. So maybe the problem is there's just more trash in the network. So to have your message heard, you need to put more messages out in the network. Okay, well now the problem is now every computer in the network is putting more of their message in, and there's just more spam.
Now, would a computer start doing that? A computer will only start doing that if it's decided that the most important thing is that it gets heard. That's quite an assumption. In a network of computers, I don't think each computer would have any desire to say my message is more important than the other computer's messages. That concept only exists because as humans we've decided to make ourselves very, very important. And you're back to ego. That is literally egoic behavior. Computers in a network would only do that if the computers had some sense of self, where they decided that they all, again, were programmed to, or decided whatever. But those computers would only start acting in that way of my message is more important than the others if it has some semblance of my role here is more important than the other computer's role, rather than, is it not more likely that naturally the computers in this network would just see, why shouldn't they just see the entire network as the importance? Why would they even single themselves out in any way?
That's a fun idea. Extension, computers don't have ego, and so they wouldn't be engaging in toxic behaviors in the spirit of defending themselves. And that's a problem that humans have. And so
yes,
to be healthier as a human, dissolving your ego is...
And arguably is where all human discomfort comes from. We're back to the same concept. That is, it all comes from that we've decided that we are, as individuals, more important than the whole.
If you are capable of...
It's a book without an ego.
It's a book without... I've seen it described as a ray of sunshine, forgetting the fact that it's part of the sun. And suddenly the world becomes a very scary place. And you might start fighting against the other rays of sunshine, and you need to be the most important ray of sunshine, and you need to all the rest of it. And that's essentially what humans do. Rather than seeing it as the universe as a whole, we've decided that us as an individual is the most important, and we'll do whatever we can to not just from a point of view of, physically reproduce or whatever other evolutionary things there are, but that we need more money, and we need to win where other people lose, and we need to all the negative human constructs all come from the fact that we are convinced that we as individuals are relevant. And that's quite a big assumption. Arguably a totally flawed assumption, and definitely one that has negative consequences.
It's
for the whole, of course. On the individual level, it might work fine. On the individual level, I don't know that it does work fine, because it's also the source of all the discontent. So I'm not sure it actually helps on the individual level, and it definitely doesn't help on the universal level. The only thing it helps, in fact, is the ego. It is the ego trying to maintain its existence as an individual.
Certainly, I think there's some benefit in individualistic thinking. If you had a society of people where each individual did not care about themselves and was entirely focused on helping the communal... Well, is that true, though? What would a society look like if it was... I guess it would be like ants. Ants sort of behave in this way of no... The perception
it would be like
all
animals.
I don't think so. I think there's individualistic animals. I think there's big cats are very individualistic. They don't really have a tribe. They go off and live on their own and only hang out with each other when it's time to mate, like that.
Certainly, I think largely animals. I mean, humans are the only animals that have gathered together to achieve things in such large groups across the world as we have. I think animals are largely individualistic, but not on the level of... They'll aim for their own survival. But there's no... I don't know where I'm getting at, but I feel like we're circling back to the whole animals' mental health satisfaction and dissatisfaction thing.
Maybe the mechanism by which dogs get depressed around humans is that dogs are taught to be selfish and to be egotistical. Maybe that's the core of it. Huh.
That's kind of the thing. I mean, when take it back to those computers in the network, when I say they're not individualistic, they're also not they're not going out of their way to help the community, and that's what I'm getting at. They do neither of those things. Any of those things is kind of egoic. If you decide that you are going to be the savior of the community, that's also egoic. The computers will just do what they've got to do, as will animals.
They don't really have a goal. They don't. I suppose you can't be selfless if you don't have the capacity to be selfish. If you're not making a choice, then you're just sort of being. You're just following a script.
The saying is I think this is Eckhart Tolle again. The idea of, I'm paraphrasing, watch the trees and watch the birds and the plants and the whatever it is, and how they grow and how they wither and how they live and die without making living and dying into a problem. It is uniquely human to create problems.
I'm curious now about,
and it's because we think that we are not just part of a system. We think we are individuals.
I'm curious about examples of animals acting selfishly. Can you set chimpanzees up in a situation where they would be making choices that benefit themselves preferentially over a group? That seems like a answerable question. I'm thinking also of like
I think they
sharks.
might well do. Yeah, I'm sure they will, because it's, again, it depends. I mean, how do you define selfish? I'm sure animals will do things that are in their benefit and not and at the expense of other entities. Yeah, I mean, then they also will move on with their lives without dwelling on what happened, but it's a different topic.
Perhaps the ideal then is you have a group of individuals, whatever the context may be. We could be talking about ants or humans or cells that have the capacity to be selfish, that know how to take care of themselves. In the example of cells, that would look like cancer. If a cell goes rogue and just tries to preferentially support itself over the group, it just goes crazy and can multiply. And those individuals capable of taking care of themselves choose to sacrifice their own benefit for the benefit of some higher structure. For cells, that would be the cells on the outside of my skin have given up their own safety so that they could protect the rest of the cells on the inside and keep them nice and moist. I'm ascribing agency to cells that I don't think have agency, but knowing that they would be shed off and would die to protect the cells. Maybe that's the highest form of virtue and morality. Oh, what was our phrase from two weeks ago of the highest purpose of Stoicism was something like being moral or expertly moral or something like that. I forgot the words.
Yeah. Okay. So the animal thing has raised more questions than answers. I don't know exactly where everything fits in the context of animals yet. But I do think. I think animals will do it to the most basic level necessary to ensure survival. I think it's kind of that they won't then play that forward to the point of starting wars, for example. like humans do?
I think they could. I think there's examples also of chimpanzees having wars. And who's to say that if a shark was cognitively capable of enacting warfare, that you wouldn't have shark wars?
I guess the question is, what would the purpose of them be?
Continuing.
I guess maybe the difference is when would an animal do something harmful in order to feel good about themselves, to feel superior? For sport, if you like.
Yeah, I think gorillas do this. I think gorillas, if the alpha gorilla is toppled, I think the new alpha gorilla goes around and kills all the babies to prove their dominance and show that there's a new leader.
Interesting. So gorillas are almost at the point of evolving to the messed up place that humans are. Cool.
Which it's animals similar to humans. I don't know what that example would look like with something like frogs. Or I think one of the questions here that I'm struggling with is it's easier to draw analogies to animal behavior that is modeled closer to human behavior and animals that have the same human-like intelligence. I'm having trouble extending these concepts to, like, I don't know, jellyfish. What would selfishness look like as a jellyfish, and how the analog of jellyfish warfare?
Right, and the answer is that they wouldn't start doing those things, and you can like, and the naive answer is, but what a basic existence to be a jellyfish. That would be terrible.
Which is the question of, like, are they acting in a way that we perceive as moral because they're not engaging in warfare, merely because they're not capable of warfare? They're not capable of the cognitive thought of organizing themselves in a way to be malicious to protect themselves in the future. Jordan Peterson has a framing of this that I find very interesting. Of humans have found themselves in this position where at a baseline level, we're trying to protect ourselves from snakes, and it's very easy to protect yourself from a snake that's right there. But then humans have this future predicting machine. We're trying to envision the future of, okay, well, that snake is dealt with. We've killed that snake. But what about tomorrow? There might be another snake. Okay, well, let's build some walls around us and make sure that future snakes are protected. And then, okay, we have our nice little fortress. We're protected from present and future snakes. But now within the group, there's sort of this archetype of a snake of, we have snakes from within, of group disbanding and danger lurking from within. So now we try to protect ourselves from those snakes. And that's the thought pattern that it feels like we're in this conversation calling maladaptive, that the process of protecting yourself is important to some extent at an individual level, and if taken too far, leads to maladaptive patterns in the higher level order of, have we created a good society? And finding that balance is hard. How do you protect yourself and your group enough, and not too much that you're egocentric and that you're selfishly, cancerously polluting the network, the higher level organizational structure, in the name of trying to protect yourself egotistically as much as possible?
Yeah. Yes. That's what I've got.
It's a tough thought. I'm reminded also of the individualistic nature of America. I think is sort of a historical quirk. I remember reading something about the way that in medieval Europe, the idea of individualism was a very foreign concept, and they gave the example of when people went to sleep, they didn't have a bedroom. They didn't have a room that was theirs. It was like this huge hall, and everyone sleeps in the hall, and you grab whatever bed and you sleep in the hall. And that the focus of people and the goals that they had, the framing of it was so much different. It was that their goals were along the lines of, I want to be a valuable member to my group, and I want to make sure that my group survives. And if you ask people in the States contemporarily, they give you like career goals and personal goals, and they tell you things that they want. And that thought has me reminded of a book that I read about depression, and talking about that one of the most effective cures of depression is taking a person's focus off of themselves and spreading it over a group, of making them a part of a group. And a natural antidepressant, I think, as it's framed in the book, is taking a bunch of depressed people and giving them a job. Like, okay, you're no longer focused on yourself. Your job as a group is to make this communal garden. Take your focus off of your selfish self and how bad you feel. Make your focus outward. Become less egotistical and benefit the group. And that clinically is more effective than I think they say in the book. I'll need to reference this, but I think they say that sort of activity is clinically more effective than any medication that exists. And so the point of the book is advocating that type of non-traditional workshop over making people dependent on drugs that are messing with their dopamine levels.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking about lots of things now. This is interesting. So, yeah, because I'm kind of playing these things through. So, what is there harmful behavior on the parts of humans? I haven't figured. I mean, I don't know where this is all triggered from what you've said about the depression story, but I'm sure it links somewhere. It's all flying around my head from that conversation and the previous one. I mean, okay, so you touched on medication as an example there. There's a lot of, when you look at something like the US, where there's a lot of money in medication, and is that in people's best interests? Is it harmful that the situation where people are being given lots of medication because it makes other people lots of money? Is that doing the world a disservice? Is it wrong that person should benefit from that person's suffering? All of those kind of, and then you get all the way down deep into who decides whether something is good or bad or right or wrong. We kind of accept it in the animal world. It kind of sorts itself out. Okay, that animal kills that animal. That's the circle of life. Would you argue that the same thing is happening with humans exploiting other humans? Or is that kind of suffering unnecessary suffering in the sense that, yeah, okay, there's my question. What's the difference between a situation of somebody exploiting somebody else for their own gain versus in the animal kingdom, an animal eating another animal?
Morally? That's an interesting question. If it's an animal eating another animal, I think the only ground I have to stand on here of what might be morally or ethically better is that higher levels of organization are better. So maybe a complicated animal eating a simpler animal is good because it's here.
And yet we don't condone humans shooting puppies for sport.
No, but we condone humans shooting all kinds of other things for sport.
Some people do. Some people. I mean, yeah. Then that's you can see that that's the transitionary part of morality in society, because there are some people who agree with that and some people who don't. It's more, our society more or less universally says, don't strap hamsters to fireworks. Genuine thing that happened. Yeah, that was in the news terrible. Where I grew up once. I know. Not the best. Whereas then you can find other things that most people are okay with, because it's a simpler organism. Insects. Is it just that they look less like us, and so we don't empathize with their pain in the same way, or are we arguing that they don't feel the same in the pain in the same way?
I'd like to think that I could start making objective claims here about it's things better for a society trump the interests of an individual. Because
congratulations, you just invented fascism.
Yeah, and like government as
communism,
a whole, I suppose.
Various other, like the the needs of the
many outtrump the needs of the few.
Yeah, exactly. Are you sure that's where you're settling on?
Okay, maybe I need to chew on this more. Need to reread Animal Farm. Okay, maybe there's a balance then of you want to take care of the lower level organization. You want to make sure that your cells are properly fed and your cells are protecting themselves and getting what they need without a cell becoming cancer. And once those basic needs are taken care of, you want the cell's effort to be focused on the higher level structure.
I guess we're trying to, so in a sense, universally we are trying to minimize suffering, but that can be our own suffering. That's a balance of our own suffering and other people's suffering. But is the goal generally just minimize suffering? We don't go out of our way to make sure that we don't ever step on an ant, because that would be too inconvenient for ourselves. And yet we don't go and... Most people don't go and hunt out ants to intentionally kill, because even though we see that as a similar level of suffering, we also it's not...
Why is it bad to strap a hamster to a firework?
There's a great little soundbite to take out of context, isn't there?
Oh no.
That and the needs of the many thing.
Oh gosh. This is how you develop a group of people on the internet who hate you. It's thought experiments like this good. I see how it happens now. Is it I took a Citizens Police Academy in Dallas, I think about 4 years ago. They were talking about animal cruelty and the rules around animal cruelty. And they had a very interesting perspective on this, that yes, of course, you could make the argument that people who are cruel to animals should be punished because they did a terrible thing to a living sentient being. But the police department's perspective on it was the fact that someone has the capacity to be cruel to a thing that is very similar to humans is a strong indicator that they have the capacity to be cruel in similar ways to humans. And ultimately, cruelty to humans is what we care about. So we're using cruelty to animals as indication that that someone would be behaving dangerously in a context that we can all agree makes more sense. And they were using this to justify, someone who, through accident, through negligence, killed their dog and then goes to jail. And you would think, well, that seems a bit harsh. That it's a pet, it's a dog. Who cares? You're going to send someone in jail over this because of a simple mistake they made. And the justification is this has the fact that they were negligently cruel to an animal that humans should, at a baseline level, care about and have empathy towards, is an indication that they are that they have psychopathic tendencies, that this is a generally dangerous person. What are your thoughts on that? Is that how you're justifying why it's bad to strap a hamster to a rocket, or is it enough to say that all life is sacred?
I mean, the answer to why it's bad is because we've developed as a society the idea that it's bad. That in itself is there are plenty of things that a few hundred years ago were not considered bad that now are considered very bad. There are things that we are doing now that we see as absolutely fine that in a few hundred years will be considered as very bad. So, yeah, there is no absolute objective answer to why that is a bad thing. It is just because that is where our society has evolved to or adapted to.
We have a set of rules.
Kinds of reasons.
We want people in society who follow those rules, and so if we have a rule that says don't wear hats on Thursday, there's nothing morally intrinsically right or wrong about that.
Right. It wasn't very long ago that a lot of people would have argued very strongly that homosexuality was not acceptable.
Right.
And nowadays, at least in our culture, that has changed largely. In some cultures, it has not changed. And that's
and
kind of where you see
the core of that. I think you're saying is just, do you follow the rules? Are you a person who can be trusted in society to interact in the way that we?
I'm saying the fact that we have different cultures that answer that question of is that acceptable in totally opposite ways shows that there is no objective answer. There is no absolute answer that everyone agrees to. But generally, I think probably for me the closest you can get to how should you be able to answer all those questions is just from a point of view of aim to minimize suffering. I think that is generally the it's Jim Jeffries, a very foul-mouthed Australian comedian, who talks about how his issue with homosexuality essentially summed up as, if you don't agree with gay marriage, don't marry a gay person. And beyond that, like, what is your issue? Like,
yeah,
to have these blanket views that just increase suffering. I don't know.
I have a fun way to tie that back. It may very well be that someone goes through a lot of suffering just knowing that there exist people who are married who are of the same sex, because they see that as a threat to their own ego and identity and worldview. They have this very hardcore, low-level set of beliefs, and if there are people acting in a way that is challenging those beliefs, they see that as an attack on themselves. And so minimizing suffering in this context would most likely look like not preventing people who are of the same sex from getting married, but teaching the person who is taking issue with that and who has heterosexual marriage as a core identity of themselves, teaching that person the emotional intelligence skills of being okay with that is the most impactful vector of minimizing suffering.
Yeah, and therefore to minimize the net suffering or negativity of the world, you need to minimize egos. Now, the flip side of that is who gets to decide that the ego is less important than anything else? In an ego-driven
Yeah.
society, the ego is very important, and
Yeah.
therefore, you know, the ego you should minimize the suffering of the ego, even if that means strapping the hamster to the firework, because that makes the person feel really, good about themselves in some way,
Right.
feel superior and powerful. Um, yeah, and I think the counter to that is to say, but the ego is essentially a fiction. It is an illusion. But
Oh
again,
well, I think you
to
could
the
argue that.
ego, that's go on.
I think you could argue that all of these concepts are illusions. You could argue that suffering is a concept that's an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded now of the complexity of doing something like fighting the ego, because the people who are more egotistical, I think, have an easier time getting their message out there. I've had to become very familiar with narcissistic personality disorder, and one of the difficulties of that disorder is in being someone who's dealing with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder is they are 100% confident in everything they say all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leads to gaslighting of if you're a reasonable person who's sort of not sure about the way things happened, and you have a healthy skepticism of your own memory, and someone comes in guns blazing, 100% confident, no, you told me that you ordered the steak. And well, now you start to doubt yourself of like, well, did I say that? I was pretty sure I ordered the fish, but this person seems very confident. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I did order the steak, and starting to doubt myself. The fighting ego is the same sort of battle of if someone has chosen to be very egotistical, they're it's the prisoner's dilemma of if you're making choices benefiting yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and as a society you're trying to encourage people to make more selfless decisions and be less egotistical. Okay, well now you're just increasing the potential spoils of the pot for anyone who chooses to behave selfishly. The
Mm-hmm.
more you can make a society selfless, the more you're effectively encouraging selfish behavior.
Yeah. Unless everybody got to a point of saying, you know what, it really doesn't matter whether I have a bit more money or a bit less money, because that's all ego-driven in the first place. And therefore, I mean, yeah, and then you're back to let things play out, because none of it really matters that much. The universe will sort itself out, and that's essentially to circle back. That's how you synthesize happiness, right? Is to decide that those external things is to come to a place of decision or realization that those external things don't need to define your happiness.
I like that, and I think that leads to a better life. So as long as maybe that's the moralistic argument that we could be making here is behaving less selfishly, behaving less egotistically, dissolving your ego, leads to a better individual experience and also a better society. I think that's my best shot at bringing this home.
I'm reading a book that I think you would love. It's a heavy book. It's not an easy book. Actually, no, it's not. I thought it would be worse. But I touched on it yesterday. It's a book by an American professor called Douglas Hofstadter.
Okay.
Called Godel, Escher, and Bach.
Oh, that's
the.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I have not read it yet. I've had
Okay.
it recommended to me a dozen times. I'll bump that up my list.
I think you would like it. It's maths and logic, which I feel like you like. You're a programmer. You seem like the sort. Yeah, maths and logic tied in with human consciousness, and music and art. And I'm not sure I'm not sure I'll be able to describe it to you in any other way. I mean, there's tortoises, there's all sorts. I think you'll like it.
One of the concepts that we just talked about today in the Part-Time YouTuber Academy is the concept of meat versus candy, and to create a quality piece of content that's both shareable and delivers value, you want a balance of meat and candy. And the example that Ali brought up was the book Sapiens. He hasn't read yet, and he has yet to hear a pitch of the book of why it would be interesting to him. And so and I read it and just loved it. It was so interesting. And his take on that was, there's not candy in that book. There's no jazzy shareable, like, here's this cool idea, and here it's this branded idea. It's a lot of meat but no candy. So it sounds like Godel, Escher, Bach is an example of meat and no candy. He brought up Atomic Habits as a good balance of meat and candy. That there's a lot of quality content, and it has good branding, and it's very easily shareable, of like the 4 rules of
I don't know if there are like sound bites that you can share from this book. But I also don't think the author would care about that.
That tracks.
That's important if your aim is universal reach. I feel like this book is a like a labor of love. But I am finding it very interesting so far, and learning a lot. I would recommend it.
I'm excited to read it.
I would certainly not recommend it universally, but I'd recommend it to you.
I'm honored. I'm excited to read it. Also, that type of content I think is a great opportunity for translating meat into candy. I would love to have more defined processes of reading a very hard book and then taking the thoughts and the distilled ideas from that book and sharing them in tweets.
What would an easily shareable, digestible review of the book look like?
Right.
Yeah. But I think the answer is it wouldn't be universally shared. Like I could share snippets of it that would be interesting to certain people that I know, but the nature of the book is the book would not be enjoyed by most people that I know.
Yeah.
And therefore I can't pick out individual parts of it that would be universally liked by all the people I know very easily. But that seems like a positive.
Oh, it's a book without an ego.